Evening, everybody. I'm attorney Chris DeBari, and welcome to my weekly legal presentation called Legalese, where I just try to discuss important topics and relevant information and just try to provide you with a strategy sometimes in practical situations you might find yourself in with regards to personal injuries, accidents, and so forth. And if you like what you hear today, please feel free to share, comment, or like below. And I really appreciate your feedback and your comments. I've gotten some excellent comments and questions. In fact, this evening I am going to be addressing a question that was asked after one of my recent presentations by a very dear friend of mine, John Carroll, up in Destin. He's a builder up there. He and I went to school together back in New Jersey years and years ago. And he asked a very important question. And the question he asked was, do you need to call the police if you're involved in a minor accident? Now, the answer to that question is no, but as you can imagine, it's a little more complicated than that, because when it involves the law, it usually is. So just to point out, some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they've been involved in an accident, particularly accidents that aren't their fault, is they do not contact the police to come and document the situation, the scene, and they do not collect information at the scene of the accident. And the trouble with information and with witnesses is they disappear into the wind, and once they're gone, and they can no longer help you. They can no longer bolster your case. They can no longer support your theory. Then it just becomes your word against somebody else's. But when you actually involve the police at the scene of an accident, even in a minor incident, you just add more credibility. You add better documentation to the scene. So even though you don't have to do that, I would always recommend that you do. And I'm going to get into a little more detail as to why it's important as well. But, sometimes you get involved in an accident and, you're wondering, should I call the police? Or you may not at first think you're hurt. You could be so shocked or surprised and the adrenaline is just pumping and you don't feel any pain because you're all jacked up and you're thinking you just want this to be over with. And if I call the police, it's going to drag out and take more time. You may be in a hurry. You may be on your way to work. You may be dropping someone else off at work and you don't want them to be late. But for whatever your reason, it's still a good idea to call the police. And in fact, you may have a worse reason not to call the police. You may have an expired registration on your vehicle. You may have an expired driver's license or lack of auto insurance, and you may not want the police to find that out. And while that's understandable on some level, you really kind of have to think of the bigger picture with regards to your injuries and your potential claim for injury later on. So now, according to the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, there are upwards of about 250,000 traffic crashes in Florida every year. 250, 250,000 traffic crashes in Florida. So you probably think the police are a little stretched. That's a lot of business going on there. But regardless of any reason that you may have to not want to call the police, there are definitely some times when you should. And let me give you a few examples. If you're involved in an accident and the property damage is obviously greater than $500, I would call the police. The vehicles need to be towed from the scene of the accident. If there's a safety issue at the scene of the accident, call the police. That's what they're there for. If a commercial vehicle or if public property was destroyed, you want to call the police. If you're dealing with an intoxicated driver, or if a driver flees the scene and you can get their license plate, in any event, call the police. So at least the police can come to the scene and take control of the situation, and you can tell your story and document everything that needs to be documented. And even in the most minor of circumstances, even in just your typical fender bender situation, having the police officer come to the scene, even if you have to wait a little while, having him come to the scene, having him examine the vehicles, talk to the people who have been involved in the accident, assess whether or not there have been injuries, even in minor cases. This is to answer John's question. There's really no downside to it, other than you may feel bad that you're making a cop investigate a minor accident. But don't think that way. Always think that it is important, because you will have the documentation that you would need, and you may need later on, whether you know it or not. And you'll also have an independent and authoritative witness for your case in the person of the police officer. They can't testify to everything, and if they don't witness the accident, they can't say they saw how it happened, but they can testify as to what they saw, the position of the vehicles, whether there were skid marks on the ground or not. They can, determine the damage to the vehicles, and whether or not people were complaining or not of pain at the accident. So if you complain of pain at the accident, and those complaints happen to be similar to complaints you make at your doctor's office 2 months later, then it just shows a continuity of injury, and basically more credibility to your claim. And another thing too is, if you and the other driver decide you're just going to exchange information and you leave the scene of the accident, and what if he calls the cops? I know you may think this never happens, but I'm a former state prosecutor and a current criminal defense attorney, and people do that a lot of the time. And you don't want somebody to call the cops on you and say you did not adhere to your legal obligation. Oh, I told them I was hurt, but they left anyway. You can get a ticket. It's a misdemeanor. You don't want to do that. So stick around and talk to the police. Now, if you're reporting an accident where you know there is no major injury, you don't want to call 911. 911 is usually what you call when you have an accident that you think it might be serious, somebody's hurt. But if you don't want to report as serious, if it's more minor, you can call the Florida Highway Patrol, and they will send a trooper out who will examine the scene, take statements, gather information, and do a report. If you choose not to do that and you want to just do a report on your own, you show up at one of the sheriff's substations, fill out a report. You have 10 days to do that. But if you want to report a minor accident, then call star 347. Now, this is in Florida, everybody. Remember, that's where I practice, in the state of Florida. So, this may not work in Jersey, where I know the state police are a little bit of a different animal up there than they are in Florida. But star 347 will get you the Florida Highway Patrol. And be ready to give them information, the location of the accident. Describe the scene, including cross streets. You may want to describe whether or not there are any things that are distractions or obstacles. You may want to talk about anything that's dangerous, if it's the position of the vehicles, if it is somebody's injured and we need to get somebody out really quick. You want to give the license plates of the vehicles involved. You want to describe the damage to the vehicles, be detailed, and talk about skid marks in the road, obstructions, and debris, like I talked about, and give the contact information for the basically the drivers and passengers of every vehicle. That way, the police report is complete, and when the insurance companies are later looking it over, they're not saying, "Well, you say this person was involved in the accident, but it's not on the accident report." Well, just because you were there and the insurance company may have a reason to be skeptical because the police officer didn't put it on the report. So when you call the police, make sure you're thorough, as thorough as you can be with them over the phone, and certainly very thorough with them at the scene. But if you know that somebody is injured at the scene, and take some time to determine this, calm yourself down and really assess the situation. If you know or really believe that you've been hurt or somebody else has been hurt, then call emergency services right away. Don't wait. There's no reason to. If you're not sure that the situation is an emergency, maybe call 911 just to let them make that determination. If you have doubts this person may be hurt, I feel like I might be, call 911. Let that experienced operator determine whether or not you need emergency services at the scene. I think probably a lot of the time they're going to say that you do. Now, when you exchange information with other drivers at the scene of the accident, let's suppose you don't want to call the police, you don't want to involve them in any way for whatever reason, then at least try to be thorough about gathering information, because that's very, very important. Without information, you're going to make things very, very difficult. You don't find out who their insurance company is, what their policy number is. That is going to give people like me, see this gray hair? Yeah. You wonder how I got it? There you go. But you want to share this information. You want to give your full name, obviously, and get their full name. You want to take their license plate number down, and we have the cameras nowadays on our phones, so it's very easy to take a picture as long as it's safe to do so. You want to get their phone numbers, email addresses if you can get that, make and model of the vehicles involved, their insurance information, their address, all that information, and also get address and contact information from witnesses at the scene of the accident too. Photograph their driver's license, photograph their business cards. Everyone's carrying business cards nowadays. Just have them do that. I saw some questions come up. It's kind of interesting. I saw James Collins. Hey, Jim, what's up? How many of those wrecks are in rental cars? Well, that's a whole other issue. If a wreck is in a rental car, then you either have coverage that the person has paid for under the rental, which could apply to property damage, could apply to bodily injury, and some people skip it altogether. So if you get somebody that is driving a rental car that causes an accident, get not just the rental information, but get their personal information too. Don't let them just hand you the rental contract. Now you want to get their personal stuff as well. And Jim is asking me a PIP question. Why aren't PIP benefits greater in Florida, given over 11 million non-insured tourists visit the state on average every year? Let me tell you who James Collins is. He's one of the best PIP attorneys in Florida. And James asks very good questions, but I am not going to answer that question. That is a question for a different day. Maybe I'll have him on as a guest and we can talk about it. And I got a wave from Paula Luce. Hey, Paula, how are you doing? Thank you for tuning in. And Mark, thank you very much for your comment. I appreciate the encouragement. Well, folks, that is it for this evening. It was a short presentation, but I wanted to thank you all for tuning in, and I hope this information is useful to you, and I hope it does really get you asking questions and really thinking about those situations. And maybe if, God forbid, the bad thing happens and you're involved in an accident, you'll just maybe remember this and just have the presence of mind to slow down and calm down and just collect yourself and gather information and make sure that you get everything that you're entitled to get at the scene from the other driver. And that's it, folks. And I thank you very much. And I wish you all good luck and be safe and healthy. And have a good evening. Thank you for tuning in.